had to.
No, what do you mean when you say senior year? You mean 8th grade?
Ninth grade.
9th grade.
Yeah. From there, I graduated the 9th grade, and we had a pretty good basketball team. We were playing junior high basketball and playing against the other schools. And we always had a pretty competitive team. We played some softball, and we were pretty good at softball, you know, because country kids didn't have anything else to do. I mean, we played ball, and that was about all we, you know, we didn't have televisions and bicycles and things of that nature. So if you could get 4 or 5 boys together, you'd play something.
I remember when I was a kid, you were still on basketball and softball teams.
Yeah, I played even after I got to be an adult. Never was real good at it, but my brother, now he was a good baseball player. He never played any basketball, but he lived and breathed baseball. You know, he knew all the baseball players, listened to all the ball games he could find, and played, and was a good player. And he went on to high school at Brookwood, and he actually played on the baseball team at Brookwood. And he was a good runner. He was fast, and I think given proper training, he could have been a real good baseball team.
What was it like listening to those games on the radio?
Well, you know, those games on the radio, we didn't know it at the time, but they really weren't live games. What we were listening to was somebody on a teletype, and they were relaying the information on a teletype to the radio station in our area, and then the person on the radio at the radio station was translating them into the game, and he would add his own sound effects in his excitement. You know, it'd be a fly ball, and he would already know it's a home run because he's got it on a teletype, and he would be going, there's a long drive, and it's going back, and it looks like it is a home run. You know, he'd give you all, and then he'd have the crowd, and he could really make baseball exciting, but it really, we didn't know it, and it was years later before I ever found out that those weren't live telecasts. You know, they were translated because he was taking the information off a teletype machine, and then he was putting it on the local news, on the local radio stations, and we would listen to it on a battery operated radio. You know, one of those had a big old battery on it, and didn't get very good reception anyhow. But you know, my brother loved baseball so much he wanted to listen to as many games as he could, and he played as much baseball as he could. But
when the reception got worse on the radio, what'd you do for?
Well, we would go out and put water on the ground wire.
Uh-huh.
You know, it was grounded. We had a wire that would run out to outside, and we would hook it up to the ground wire. You know, we would drive a metal stake in the ground or something, and we would put water on it, and that way it would ground, and we'd get a little bit of. But it was years later that we got electricity. I think it was in the 50s. I don't remember exactly what year, but when we got electricity, it was, you know, we were living in a 4-room house, 5 kids, and mom and dad. And the electricity we had would be one light bulb in the center of each room.
Mm-hmm.
There was no wall plugs or anything like that. So if you were going to hook anything into it, like if my mom had an electric iron, we would have to put one of those adapter in that light, and then we would have to plug into it. And you might have 2 or 3 things coming off of it, you know, if you had. But we didn't have a lot of electric things anyhow, so it really didn't make any difference. We would have, I think we finally did get a television. It was a black and white TV, and I think it was, seemed to me like it was an Emerson TV, but I'm not sure. And my dad had bought it at the company store in West Blockton, where he worked, Black Diamond Coal Company. And he had bought that. I'm sure he bought it on a time payment plan because, you know, they were expensive at that time. And we only got one or two stations. They were coming out of Birmingham. And, of course, they wouldn't be on early in the morning, and they wouldn't be on late at night. You know, at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, they'd probably go off the air. I'm not sure exactly what time, but we would watch as much television as our parents would let us, which wouldn't be a lot, because you know, they don't just hang around in the house all the time. They want us out working, you know, working in the fields, working in the garden, feeding livestock and things of that nature. We didn't have time to be sitting around watching television. But that was typical of all kids in that area.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not many of them had televisions, and most of them were just as poor as we were.
I remember we had black and white TV when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it when the neighbors told me that Fred Flintstone's clothes were orange.
Yeah, it was it was a big deal. I remember those years trying to watch that, and it was a lousy picture. But, you know, you got some entertainment value out of it. But for the most part, you know, we got along with our neighbors. Went to school, my two younger sisters, Faye and Patricia. They went to school now. You know, I mentioned before that my older sister had already got married, and so that left my brother, who was older, and Faye and Patricia. And of course my mom was sick. She was first diagnosed with cancer in 1948, and I think I was like 8 years old at that time. And she fought the battle for a long time, you know, for 8 years.
I didn't know she was sick for so long.
Yeah, she fought that battle for 8 years, and finally got her like in January of 1956. But that that time was a bad time for us because she worked, you know, all the time, and she had a number of surgeries and things of that nature, and it had taken a heavy toll on her. And as she got weaker and weaker, she couldn't do the things for us that most mothers would do, like cooking and washing and stuff like that. She just was too weak. And we were forced to buy a car. And of course, nobody in our family drove. And of course, I had learned to drive on that Model A Ford that my daddy had paid $25 for. When he would go off to work, I would figure out a way to get that thing started, push it down the hill, or get the mule and pull it up the hill and push it down it. And I had driven that thing around and learned how to steer and learn how to give it the gas and change gears and do all of that stuff, even when I was real young. And so when we bought a car, I actually drove the car home, and I wasn't, I don't even know if I was 15 years old at the time, because my mom was not well. And the reason why we had to have a car was to get her back and forth, because she was taking radiation treatments. You know, there was no such thing back then, I think, as chemo. But she was taking radiation treatments, and I would have to take her to Tuscaloosa, which is, you know, 20, 25 miles away. And they would give her the radiation treatments to try to slow down the growth of the tumors that she was being plagued with. And, so I, even though I didn't have a driver's license or anything like that, I managed to drive her back and forth and take care of her those last couple of years. But and then just before she passed away, you know, I started school at Brookwood, and I didn't get to attend class too much at Brookwood. Although I was a good student in advance, once I got to Brookwood, which is a high school, I didn't attend enough classes, you know, because you build, you know, one lesson on top of the next
Yeah.
lesson, and I missed so much days. I missed at least a third of the time. And it was tough for me. You know, some of the classes, history and things of that nature, wasn't a problem at all, but when it come to algebra, I had taken algebra. When it came to algebra, I was struggling with algebra. Initially, I was doing good, but I missed so much time that I wasn't keeping up with my work, and I had fear that I wasn't even going to pass because of all the time that I had missed from school.
Mm-hmm.
But I did pass, I guess. I don't think I ever found out for sure that I did or I didn't, because I left home that spring.
You lit out.
Yeah, and went to Chicago. That was kind of the end of my childhood once I left, because at that point in time, I had to do everything on my own.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't have anything when I was in Vance, Alabama. I had a lot less when I left, because I didn't have anything. What I had was what I wore. Didn't have any money. But like I say, I told this story, part of this story already, that I did get a job, worked all of that summer, and started my career as working, and certainly it was a big improvement on what I was doing in Vance, Alabama.
Why don't you